Joining us on Empty the Bench, we follow this guy's work a ton. We have over the past couple of weeks when it comes to the MLB negotiations and also the minor league cuts. MLB insider Robert Murray is joining us now. Robert, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So let's get right to it. We saw all your reports on the hundreds upon hundreds of minor leaguers being released. Why do you think MLB felt that minor league cuts were necessary, and were they even necessary?
Yeah, from how it was described to me is this was the typical spring training cuts just happening a lot later because of COVID and the season being delayed and a couple other factors. So I don't think it's necessarily out of the question or unusual, but the number of players that have been released is kind of eye-opening because I believe from talking to a lot of different people that the number of released minor leaguers can end up being over 1,500 players. And we're talking about a lot of careers ending because these are fringe prospects at best in most cases. And so it wasn't unusual to see these kind of cuts, just knowing that a lot of careers are pretty much over after this is really disappointing.
So, Robert, what do you make of the future of minor league baseball as a result of all the cuts? Is there any salvaging minor league baseball even if there is a season?
Yeah, minor league baseball is in a really bad spot right now, and I think everybody in baseball would agree with that. And you have to worry about the future because there's less players that are now in minor league baseball because of all the releases, and you also have to worry about the talent that's going to be coming in this year and in future years because there's only 5 rounds in the draft. There's going to be undrafted free agency, of course, but that also significantly limits the talent pool coming in, and it's going to end up eliminating players like, let's say, Lorenzo Cain, who was drafted in the later rounds. He's no longer going to be able to be drafted. So minor league baseball, if there is a season, which highly unlikely there is, and going forward is in a really bad spot. And it's not a good thing for the future of baseball. I think everybody would agree with that. It's a matter of how bad this is going to be.
Now, Robert, that leads into a question I had, because prior to the start of the pandemic, we had the report of MLB potentially looking into cutting 40 or so minor league teams, mostly the short season and rookie clubs, after the report of the minimum wages that minor leaguers were making. Do you think this plan will go into effect after all the cuts have been made? And will that proposed Dream League work with the independent clubs? Will we even have a minor league system at all? Or would we become this NFL style practice squad and making that an MLB form? What happens here?
Yeah, that to me, I don't think we really have an answer on that quite yet. It's just, there's a lot of different factors at play here. And it's a matter of how Major League Baseball is going to handle this. And it's going to look a lot different in future years than it has been in the past. I think everybody would agree with that at this point. And you see these teams being eliminated. You see guys getting pay cuts, or coaches specifically, and then the minor league players are thankfully being paid. But a lot of teams are only doing that until June. I don't know what this is going to look like in the future for minor league baseball. It very well could end up looking like an NFL practice squad or something along those lines. I wouldn't rule anything out at this point because there's a lot of things that are being discussed. We just don't have any clear answers on what that's going to look like quite yet.
So there were some interesting comments on Twitter as well. I'm sure you saw the Peter Bear comments on Twitter. What do you make of his comments? And I guess we saw that the Athletics owner reversed course and decided to pay the minor leaguers. So what do you make of his comments on Twitter?
Wait, which comments are you referring to? I just want to make sure I have this correct.
Oh, Peter Bear came out and was kind of criticizing the Athletics organization for originally stopping to pay them.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I wanted to make sure we were on the same page with that. But yeah, with how the Athletics were criticized with not paying their minor leaguers, it's not a surprise that they ended up reversing courses. This was a widespread thing of just universal not being happy. I think that's a light way of putting it, to say the least. And I even saw a conversation on Twitter about it featured Tim Kawakami, who writes for The Athletic. He ended up tweeting at one of the high-ranking executives for the Athletics and said, pay your minor leaguers. And less than 24 hours later, they did. So, yeah, it's nice to see that they reverse course on it. I'm just kind of surprised it took them this long, and they even did the idea in the first place, because every single team in baseball, besides them, is going to pay their minor leaguers at least through the month of June.
We're talking to MLB insider Robert Murray. Robert, not just from the minor league perspective, from the whole negotiations, how would you rate the leaderships of Rob Manfred and Tony Clark?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I have heard a lot of disapproval of what Manfred has done, I think, from both the agent and player side. And Tony Clark, I think, is fair in what his stance is. I think both sides know what they want. I think they've made it crystal clear. There just has not been any movement whatsoever in these negotiations. And I think both sides at the same time, even though they have their own little things that they want, can be put at fault, because you saw the NBA agree to something. You're seeing all these other leagues that are getting going, and yet there's been no progress at all for Major League Baseball. And I've had countless people tell me that they need to come to an agreement, put their egos aside for the greater good of society, because I don't want to say that we need a distraction right now, because there's a lot going on right now that's bigger than baseball. But sooner rather than later, you would hope that they'd be able to put something together, and they just have not done that. And then, frankly, they haven't even gotten really close at all.
So, Robert, of the two sides in this equation, which of them has more sway over the proceedings? The players themselves, the owners, or which one of them is actually going to speak and be heard?
Yeah, I think both sides definitely have a say, but if we're talking about who has the biggest say in it, I would say it's the owners. And the players are not operating from a side of leverage, and they recognize that, and they're holding firm in what they want. And I had somebody tell me that this is the equivalent of being the Major League Baseball. Let's say Major League Baseball is the bully, and the players are the kid that's getting bullied. Is the kid that's getting bullied is practically just going like that, covering his ears and trying to hush him out, while Major League Baseball is beating him over the head with a stick. Like it was put into me in that terms, and it made me chuckle, but it's the actual truth. And you see Major League Baseball coming at the players publicly, and they have made this negotiation very public to the players' disliking. So I would say definitely the owners have the upper hand and leverage, and they're making it very clear publicly that they do.
And speaking of public, in terms of the court of public opinion, it seems like a lot of fans are siding with the owners despite all that's going on. Do you think that's going to stay, that the public is going to side with the owners, and why? And if we don't get a season, especially with CBA negotiations going on that were coming up in the next couple of years, how bad are going to be the consequences? Is the Major League Baseball's popularity going to take a hit?
Yeah, I think to answer your last question, is the future of Major League Baseball is not looking good. And I think the fans that they have to worry about, or Major League Baseball has to worry about the fans with the lack of a talent pool coming in, that the product is going to be worse than it is now. And that's a concern that's on everybody's mind right now. And that is going to be directly impacted by the CBA as well. There's a very real chance there's a quote unquote lockout or two of them in a span of 3 years. And that is not going to help the current generation of fans and the future generations of fans as well. And that's also a big reason why that a lot of people feel like they need to come together and get this deal done quickly, for the greater good of the game. And they also realize that the future of the game is probably at stake. And what was your first question again?
The fact that most of the public opinion is siding with the owners, like, is that going to stay?
Yeah, I think that's probably going to stay, and I don't think that's necessarily fair. It's something I actually strongly disagree with. And the reason why is a lot of people focus on the Mike Trouts and the Christian Yelich's who are making 30+ million or in that range per year, and how their pay in this scenario could end up going down to as little as 6 or 7 million. And I say little, I would still take 6 or 7 million, but a lot of the players that are being affected are the common player who are making 1 to 2 million a year. And if you end up cutting that by already 30% and then adding more on that, which Major League Baseball wants to do, that's going to significantly impact a lot of lives. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. They just assume that these guys are bazillionaires who have a countless supply of cash, when in reality, a lot of them don't. I know of a lot of coaches who previously were actually losing money in their previous stops before this all started. And now if you take away a lot of their pay, where is that going to leave them? It's going to leave them in a really bad spot. So, I mean, I can understand why some people would think that the owners have the upper hand in this, or that why they side with them. But I think a lot of the people would have to side with the players, and they should definitely reconsider their stance. And I'm not saying that's the correct answer. I'm saying that's my stance and how I feel after talking to a lot of players and coaches.
So going back to, you were talking about the NBA date, they were proposing July 31st on the table. We see MLS is coming back. We saw UFC come back. Do you think it's interesting that throughout the years, MLB and the MLBPA were seen as the two sides that got along for all these years, but now we're kind of seeing that the two sides really don't get along? And are you surprised that MLB could be the last sport back to the table when we all thought it could have been the first?
I'm not going to say I'm surprised. I'm surprised, though, it's taking this long, because going into this, it was clear that both sides really did not like each other. And as you saw Ken Rosenthal in The Athletic write earlier today, that it's like these two sides are a divorced couple who are arguing and not coming to any sort of compromise whatsoever. So in that sense, I'm not surprised that they might not be the first, or they're probably going to end up being the last. I'm just surprised it's taking this long, because you would think that with all the money that's at stake, that they could potentially lose on both ends, that they would see that and they'd come to a compromise, and they just have not. And as I said before, they are not close at all. This is actually the most pessimistic I've heard everybody that there's going to end up being a season, or that there's not going to be one.
And going to Ken Rosenthal's original report on one of the original offers that the owners had, where they also had all this whole pages upon pages of COVID-19 prevention, social distancing. Like, there were no showers in the stadiums, no spitting of the sunflower seeds, the celebrations being affected, the lockers separating the players. Is social distancing going to be possible in this version of Major League Baseball? How is this going to work? Because while Major League Baseball isn't a contact sport like NFL, NBA, NHL, where you see a lot of contact, those original things from Rosenthal seems like it's eliminating a lot of what makes baseball fun.
Yeah, it is. I don't know if social distancing is going to be possible, but I know they're going to do their best to enforce it. And it's just natural for these guys to spit their sunflower seeds, or just spit in general. And one of the things I thought about, this is how crazy my mind can be at times, is Madison Bumgarner is known for his snot rockets on the mound, and he might not be able to do that. And you got to wonder how that's going to impact him. Maybe it has a mental factor. I don't know. He apparently likes to use his snot rockets, but it's going to steal your line. It might take a lot of the fun out of the game and what makes it unique and fun. So I think that is also another thing that could really impact the game, and not in a good way either.
Thank you for using the phrase snot rockets. But
yeah, that's the first time I've used it in an interview before, so we can check that one off the bucket list.
Well, last question, Robert. I have to ask, though, assuming, of course, that they're working under the assumption that there will be a season, do you foresee MLB going on with games even if more than 1 or 2 positive tests come in? If players start to test positive on the dozens scale, what do you see MLB doing?
That is a really good question, and I'm not sure they know the answer to that either. I think that's going to have to be something that's agreed upon before we have games again. But my guess is that if there's one or two cases, that they put those players in a quarantine and continue to play baseball. But if you have a massive outbreak, as you said, dozens, I think that's when they have to step in and do something. And is that how they're going to end up doing it? I don't know, but that's how I personally would handle it. But the safety and everything with the players is going to be the number one thing. And ultimately what I think is going to be the driving force behind these guys potentially agreeing to a deal.
That was Robert Murray, MLB insider. We have a lot to look forward to in these MLB negotiations. We talked about minor leaguers and everything that's going on with them, but hopefully we can figure out what's going on with Major League Baseball, and hopefully we can have it because we're all fans of it. Robert Murray, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me.